Okay, we're live. Welcome to a very special episode of the Binary Business Show. I am going to preface this with, we're going to be talking about something that happened last week, and I needed about a week to kind of emotionally detach from it before I was ready to talk about it in an objective manner. So we're going to be talking this week about our headline story. I'm just going to dive right in before we do introductions to make sure people know what today's conversation is about. Is the City of Columbus sues researcher who disclosed impact of ransomware attack. Yeah, this is going to be a fun one. My name is Logan Edmonds. I'm CEO of TTS. Why don't you take a minute to introduce yourselves?
My name is Brian Jodry. I'm president of an IT service provider called B Networked Incorporated.
And I am Baron Breathitt, the founder of Limitless Network Solutions in Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay, well, let's dive straight in first, right? Like, what exactly happened? For those of you who are tuning in, I live in Columbus, so I have been watching this since day one, trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And here's what I pieced together based on news articles and just living and hearing about what's going on. Approximately around July 18th, City of Columbus fell victim to a ransomware attack. What was kind of interesting about this is it does appear the city managed to fend off the full file encryption portion of the ransomware attack. That never occurred, as far as we can tell. They basically managed to, catch it and wipe some of the stuff, but not before allegedly the attackers were able to run off with a copy of a lot of data. Like, I think we're looking at about 6.5 terabytes of data. It's a significant sum. Everything about the city, ranging from allegedly the court municipality, court cases, city citizens' personal information, tax information, employee information. I mean, allegedly, there are even defendants in court cases who previously, or witnesses in court cases that are previously anonymous and scrubbed from court records, like public records, that now been disclosed. We're talking like sexual assault victims kind of things, right? Like not a good thing at all. And so what happened is the ransomware attackers, I'm going to butcher this, and I think we already made a joke about this, Ricida, that's what they're called by, Ricida ransomware gang, realized they couldn't just hold the data hostage in the traditional sense of pay us to give us your data back. So they moved to plain old blackmail, by all accounts. They moved to I believe the number was $2 million, pay us $2 million, or we're going to put this data up for auction on the dark web. City didn't pay, data went up for auction, and that's where our story begins. Did I miss anything, guys?
No, I think you've got it pretty good. And I mean, it should be noted too, from a general security perspective, that this is kind of the new play as far as these ransomware events go. They're stealing all the data they can before they encrypt it, because it gives them a twofold approach to how they can try to extort money for businesses instead of just straight up encrypting it and hoping they don't have backups.
Yeah. Yeah. Plain old blackmail with leverage is what they're shooting for in some cases, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm kind of on both sides of the fence on this one, personally. Albeit, I don't think that the guy should have come publicly and let everybody know that this data was out there, because it just draws more attention to it. But at the same time, the city's got to try to cover their rear ends after what they've done.
Well, let's talk about that, because that's the whole headline today, right? Like, so what happened, right? August 8th, the city didn't pay. Criminals dumped the data. August 13th, the Columbus mayor, Andrew Ginther, explained, hey, data, it looks like by all counts is unreadable. It was encrypted or quote unquote corrupted. And that's why at the time he made the statement, he made the allegation that the criminals still hadn't managed to auction off the data. Basically, hey, it's going to be okay, right? That's what he was kind of going for there. What the controversy was is a security researcher local to Columbus, David Leroy Ross. He goes by a different name. I think he has a pseudonym he goes by underneath. I cannot let me remember it. But he went on media and with receipts, right? He said, hey, no, that's not true. And I have proof. Here's X showing that this data is not encrypted. It's not readable. And this is absolutely the kind of stuff the citizens of Columbus would care about. Like personally identifiable information, like social security numbers, all that fun stuff, right? Like stuff that's very obviously no bueno. There was a bit of a tit for tat, right? I believe it was a couple of back and forths, and then the end result was, hey, city sued him for criminal acts of negligence, and more importantly, a temporary restraining order to keep him from disseminating any more of the data. That was the biggest thing they wanted to get. The judge did grant that temporary restraining order. So, to your point, Aaron, I'll go back to you now. We kind of got the context out of the way. You see both sides. kind of elaborate now that we kind of laid that out on what you are kind of struggling with in the devil's advocate position here?
Well, again, it should never have been brought to the limelight like the researcher did. That in our line of work is just something you don't do. You don't make public, this information. You find other venues personally is what I would have done, I think. However, I said the city definitely has to cover their rear end to they've let a lot of information out that should never have gotten public in any way, shape, or form. The victims and the private detectives and everything else that they've got going on, that's bad. They should have been protecting that better to begin with. So I think they're upset that the guy released that stuff, and so they had no other choice but to do that. But this is not like it wasn't something that is not publicly available. Everybody can get to the dark web.
I think that's what I struggle with too, right? Like, if you look at the complaint itself, so first and foremost, it sounds like one of the specific quotes that the article referencing, which is from Security Week, says, and I quote, "This data will potentially include sensitive personal information of police officers, as well as reports submitted by arresting and undercover officers involved in the apprehension of persons charged criminally by the city's prosecutor office." I read reports that said they stole court records as far back as 2014, right? 10 years worth of records. Brian, you're being a little quiet, right? What's your take on this?
Well, I mean, I was just going to give Aaron his chance there, but I think, conversely, the city didn't seem to have a really clear picture of what was out there potentially and the risk that individuals were exposed to. I think there's certainly a right for people to know when their data has been exposed, and comes down to, I guess, whether or not they had a clear picture of exactly what had been exposed. I mean, their claim that they thought that the data was corrupt or encrypted obviously isn't something that they made up. They wouldn't have just put a falsehood out there. So it possibly speaks to the fact that it takes a bit of time to dig into these investigations and really figure out what's going on. So yeah, you get into that ethical discussion of whether or not the data should have been disclosed and whether or not he tried to inform the city ahead of time while they were kind of committing to a certain narrative. Temporary restraining order is not something that's all that difficult to get. I mean, it's a legal process whereby they're going, okay, let's stop talking about this for a second so we can figure out exactly what's going on and give us enough time to formulate a proper response to whether or not there should be, an injunction towards the publication of this data, or, whether we need to further investigate, whether it was responsibly disclosed or not. So,
yeah, I see both sides of this. One thing is, it does feel like it was the data was dumped on August 8th, and we're talking about a lot of data. 6.5 terabytes is a significant sum. And then the mayor makes a public statement on August 13th. That's 5 days. The average forensic time I see when people go through data dumps and data breaches, we're talking months usually on average for an incident response team to kind of figure out what happened, who did what, and what was the blast radius, right? Like that's often the case so many times I've seen. So it did feel a little premature as I read through this timeline. After 5 days, say, hey, mayor goes on a public statement. We think this data is okay. There's nothing wrong with it, right? Like that's fog of war, right? Fog of war. It feels like it was a very premature thing to do. Probably should have waited a little bit longer before making that kind of statement.
And is that information they got from their internal IT team? Did they engage some kind of professional incident response that gave them that information? And there may not have been a real correct disclosure of exactly what was going on. Like, I guess one of the questions in my head is, did the city, engage a qualified cybersecurity team in order to dig into this? And what information did they get from them? Where did this information come from as far as what was being told to the general public?
Yeah, if she wants to Google that, I believe they did engage an IR firm, but I don't have a media source to pull up to back that. So if you want to Google that real quick for me while I'm talking, That'd be awesome. Speaking from that for our audience. I see it both ways, right? Like I think there was a general unawareness by the powers that be. And I think that's true for our general audience, right? Like things really have changed and gotten way worse. And the problem is it's slightly out of sight, therefore it's out of mind for the general audience and the general public. Like I think the city was kind of flabbergasted at how much damage a criminal gang allegedly operating from countries away could wield over them, right? I've seen reports of obviously this database probably should have been encrypted, right? There was a fail through on some process here of basic security best practices. You have a sensitive database of any kind, best practices. Hey, encrypt that sucker. So somebody tries to exfiltrate it and take it off the network. It's unreadable without the proper keys. That's definitely, there's failings there too. I think this is what I dig into here. And there's a statement that they reference. I'm going to pull it up here real quick just so our audience can read it too. And this is the part I think from the city that's a bit duplicitous and doesn't paint in a good light. So furthermore, the city Columbus claims that although shared publicly, the information on Resida's, the ransomware gang site, is only accessible to individuals who have quote unquote computer expertise and tools necessary to download the data from the dark web. They make it sound like the dark web is this really sophisticated thing that only hackers in a hoodie in a basement with tons of technical skills can get to. And the honest truth is, it's a web browser nowadays. I mean, it really is. Like, there's a web browser you can Google and find step-by-step guides on the internet, public internet, by the way, of how to go to these places and look at this data. It's out there. Whether the city wants to admit it or not, at that point, once it's on the dark web, that data is in the hands of millions and millions of people who are perusing the dark web daily. And does it serve the citizens to kind of have a false sense of security? Oh, only certain people can access this data, when the honest truth is that's absolutely not the case. It just takes one person to download that data and dump it on a public website, and all of a sudden anybody can read it. I struggle with that, right? Like I struggle with that. Like, don't get me wrong. I hear what you're saying about he probably should have approached this directly. And for all we know, he might have. I don't know. We don't have that context. I didn't see anything in the lawsuit that indicated that, but he might have. But at the same time, does it serve the city's best interest to have a false sense of security, saying, "Oh, we're all okay," when the honest truth is, no, we're not. And to back that up, originally the city was only going to do credit monitoring and fraud insurance, according to the article, for its employees. After the disclosures to the media, they expanded that to any citizen in the city that was impacted by the data breach. And it appears, according to the article, based specifically as a response from this researcher going public about that. So I see it both sides, but I also think that this is just too far, right? Like you're saying being a security researcher means that you're criminal. I mean, I'll reference the article even further down here. They were saying, hang on, I gotta go here a second. Where was it? Oh, I apologize. It's not 6.5 terabytes. It's 3.1 terabytes. I was just corrected by that. 3.1 terabytes. Still a significant amount of data. I'm going to go ahead and make a correction there. But they said, go ahead.
I was going to say, Brian found a good thing about the article too. Ooh. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, sorry. I was just trying to dig up a little bit more on that and see if there was any kind of information on the incident response. And I was quickly perusing another article that I came across here. And it does say that the security researcher in question here did try to alert the city first about his findings. And it seems to indicate that they weren't overly receptive to his reach out. Now, again, turning around immediately after the fact and going directly to the media may not have been the right thing to do, but
it's not on him. I think in a lot of cases, like this is a lot of the fundamentals of being a whistleblower, right? Like public, there is no more public authority that the city should trust more than the mayor, right? The mayor going and making a public statement and saying, "Hey, there's nothing to see here. Everybody's fine." That is the definition of a false sense of security. And honestly, like if I don't have context for this, and I'm inclined as a citizen of the city to trust the mayor's statements on this, right? Like, oh, I have nothing to worry about. There's a lot of elements here I think that are whistleblowing. And if he did try to go to the city first, and I don't know what the timeline is, Brian, Like, was it you get to see a couple days to get back to them? Was it a couple hours? Right? Like, what we're talking about here. But
yeah, I don't know that either. That information doesn't seem to be directly available in any sources that I've looked at. I mean, if you look at things from the perspective, I mean, in the IT world, we have something, kind of a framework that we call responsible disclosure, whereby, you look at the risk and the impact associated with something, whether it's exposed data, vulnerable systems or software, and kind of look at the risk involved in disclosing it, trying to bring it to the stakeholders that, the data or the systems belong to, and look for a reasonable response from them with regards to going, okay, well, we need to fix that. We need to patch that. We need to close that door. We need to identify, whether this exposed data was accessed or stolen or actioned on by cyber criminals, and give those organizations a reasonable time to respond. I mean, it's certainly not something where, well, I told you yesterday and you didn't do anything about it today, so I'm going to go tell more people. That's not a reasonable course of action in my mind.
You gotta give, but we also too, to be fair, this feels like it's gonna have a chilling effect on a lot of the researching industry that we rely on as defenders as well. And
Absolutely.
I get frustrated about is, I get it. It's not comfortable to have somebody bring up your dirty laundry, but the honest truth is I'd rather a responsible researcher disclose it, bring it to light, so sunshine can be the best disinfectant and we can address it proactively, versus a criminal who's never going to disclose it for as long as possible, leveraging that for illicit financial gain. I mean, our tools and technology and strategies are 100% based on the research that researchers like this come up with. Everything from technical vulnerabilities to illicit data dumps on the dark web, full of credentials to, I mean, Bob's your uncle. We need these security researchers feeling confident in their work because they're a linchpin in our industry. And I get really worried when you see something like this. This is a chilling effect for sure.
And yeah, absolutely. I never like to see something like this jump straight to legal action as kind of a knee-jerk response to disclosure, because we do want people to feel that they can bring this information out into the light, because the net benefit to everyone is awareness on one side and an increased ability to secure things on the other side. We don't want to be afraid to tell people there's a hole in something just to have them turn around and throw legal threats and actions back at us.
And what does this accomplish? That's the last thing too. Like, let's just take it on an objective level. Take out like the implications of chilling effects, all that stuff. What is the city accomplishing? That data is out there, and the thing that they said that the dark web is hard to access or requires a certain skill set and tool set is just simply wrong. We see data on it on a daily basis. So, what are you accomplishing by filing this injunction order? It's all makes the city look petty. It makes the city look bad in a lot of ways. It puts a chilling effect on our industry, and that data is still going to get spread around. It's just now the one guy that was going to the news and letting the normal citizens know, hey, this is going on. He can't talk. Sorry, I take that back. He can't disclose specific data from the dump. He can still talk to the media. I did read an update on that. They can't take away his free speech abilities, but they're saying, hey, the data that we're sharing with the media, the receipts, right? Don't do that. And the judge has given him a temporary restraining order. The city has a temporary restraining order. Yeah, until we can figure out what's going on, you can't disclose it.
Yeah, it's theatrics.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's going to accomplish anything. It's all showmanship, and more importantly, there are real people, as we alluded to at the beginning of this call, who are going to be dramatically impacted by this, that have a right to know and do whatever they can to protect themselves. I mean, it is absolutely. Ooh, hey, we just got a new person joining in. I think Dave just woke up. He's out coming in from California. I'll let him in. Hey, Dave, you came in for like the last 2 minutes of the stream, but yeah. Good morning out there in good old Cali. So I don't know if you were tuning in. We were wrapping up. I think the sum matter is, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is we disclosed what happened to Columbus. We disclosed sort of the broad strokes. There's definitely some mixed feelings here in terms of there's some parts of how the disclosure went down from Leroy Ross that, depending on timelines, depending on, what happened, depending on fog of war, there's some mitigating things, but the end all be all is we don't believe that suing the security researcher with a temporary injunction order is going to do a thing in terms of effectiveness. That data is out there. It's in the wild. It's not going anywhere. All you've done is keep the normal citizens of the city from learning more about how this is going to dramatically impact their lives.
Right. Yeah, I think, the one takeaway as I've read this and talked through it with some others is that, I do think the security researcher should have maybe tried a little harder to get a hold of the city. He did reach out multiple times on multiple occasions. I'm not sure he took all the best approaches in doing that. But when you're in that, like you said, fog of war and stuff is happening and you want people to know, there's this strong urge to want to, do right by the citizens of Ohio and make sure that, they're protected and in the best way they can. I mean, to be fair, this data's been out there for probably close to 2 years is what it looks like. They've been in those systems. So it's really tough. It's a really tough balance to land on the correct side of that. But legal action was definitely not the right call either. Like they should have found a more productive way to kind of address the issue, bring him into the fold, say, hey, we really want to know your information. Let us, now that we see you have real information and everything else, help us, right? Instead of let me figure out a way to shut you up. And look, the reality is, just like you said, that data is out there. It's not, as they claim, hard to get to. A couple of Google searches and extra program, I can get to all that data without any problem at all. And I don't have to be a top-notch hacker, black hat hacker doing
I've watched someone with 15 minutes of Googling in the past figure out how to install the Tor web browser, which is one of the main dark webs out there.
Yeah.
Figure out how to find a web page that indexes all the 300 most popular dark web websites and get that link, and then go to that link and on a page with, and I thought this was hilarious. It's fake. You could buy faked IDs. They had 2-day shipping with the purchase. They actually advertised, hey, 2-day shipping like Amazon. I was like, this is nuts. And it took a grand total of about 15 minutes.
Right.
Like that's the world we live in now. This was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And look, as a security researcher, as somebody that really follows this stuff and tries to protect their customers and make sure, I think my biggest issue is like, I really hope this doesn't dampen the ability for people to report, because that's key, right? It's one of the biggest things about this story that drives me nuts is like, for us to have our hands tied in our ability to report really, really, it scares me, to be honest with you, because this is it Ross? His last name is Ross. Right?
He goes by Connor Goodwith as an alias, but his full name is David Leroy Ross.
Yeah. So the biggest issue that he has now is he has to fund the legal efforts, regardless whether or not they're true, right? Like, has nothing to do with truth. It's just he has to fund those. And for him to have to do that, it just seems very unfair for when he was, for the most part, trying to do the right thing, right?
And that's my concern too, is as defenders, and we talked about this earlier in the stream, and you guys can chime in here too. Like, we are 100% dependent on the work of security researchers in so many different ways. Everything from technical vulnerabilities to data dumps that contain credentials. I mean, they literally I would say they power the engine that is our defenses, right? Like, without them, we are handicapped at best. They're a linchpin. And so what I'm concerned is, hey, if I disclose this like I should in my daily job, am I getting sued and have to, like you said, pay an inordinate amount of legal fees to defend myself? Because this is going to cost that guy $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 just to defend himself of his own personal funds. No one's going to bankroll this.
Right. Well, hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully somebody takes the case pro bono. There is some First Amendment right stuff that's, in the background swirling, for at least from what I understood of some of the other researchers that are out there that are looking at this. So it's a bad position for anybody to be in. So anyway, hey, I'm really sorry for being late. Really glad I got to jump on with you guys, though. And
why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to your audience? I kind of just let you jump in real quick. Go ahead and take an air.
That's okay. So yeah, Dave Alton. I'm the CTO here at Strategic Information Resources, and we're also an MSP based out of the Southern California area.
Well, thank you all for joining today. This has been great. I think it's going to be a bit of a minute now that legal proceedings are underway before we get any more updates on this, but we could be wrong. I'm going to be following this case to see how it ends. I hope, like you said, Dave, someone like a nonprofit like the EFF, or even just a lawyer who wants to take it on pro bono for the publicity, can step up here, because the only thing I really kind of sucks is that this guy is not a millionaire, right? By all accounts, he's just a normal average researcher this is going to, we all know this as business owners. Lawyers are expensive, man.
For sure, for sure.
So I hope everything goes well for him. Thank you guys for joining. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Logan.